Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea. The LA County Fair is heaven on earth.
We talk about the big meals and tiny towns we enjoyed at the LA County Fair.
Later, John gives us his brief history of fairs before we discuss why county fairs are such a unique and important part of American culture.
Finally, we invent a multi-course meal at a high-class restaurant inspired by low-class fair food.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the Solons.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. 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 Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
Well, this past weekend, we went to the LA County Fair, and it was magical, wasn't it, buddy?
It is one of the great ways to spend a Saturday.
A lot of fried foods we consumed, which we'll get into later. But, I've been to a few county state fairs. You have as well. Growing up, we went to the California State Fair in Sacramento, and that was a pretty good fair. I think the LA County Fair is arguably bigger, and the food is definitely better. I remember the food not being great at the California State Fair.
Yeah, it's which I think people typically think of with fair food, that it's low-quality meats, deep fried in old oil, in batter that has been sitting out, and just everything's too greasy and nothing feels high quality. And on top of that, the California State Fair takes place in Sacramento in the dead middle of the summer, which is the absolute hottest time that you can be in Sacramento.
The LA County Fair, in contrast, they have all the fried foods and everything, but the food is actually really good, and the quality is really good for how unhealthy it is, for how outrageous it is. It feels like they changed the oil in the fryers. It feels like the, food safety regulations are being followed. And we want to talk at the top of the pod about one of our favorite topics, food, and we'll discuss sort of the food and drinks we enjoyed at the fair and witnessed at the fair. But we'd be remiss if we did not mention the king of fried foods, Chicken Charlie. Chicken Charlie is a man well known in these Southern California fairs. I think he works at the LA County Fair, Orange County Fair. There's that whole fair circuit, right? You're working the summer; those are your busy months, right?
Yeah, I don't know what you do the rest of the year.
Make salads,
Or
hopefully.
maybe you just make such a killing off the fair because you are selling it at high prices and massive volume. I have to imagine those fair stands are some of the highest grossing food vendors anywhere.
And it's not the most expensive of ingredients. Chicken Charlie, he himself is known for inventing the deep fried Oreo. He's kind of the guy who will fry anything. And each year at the fair, he'll fry a new confection, whether it's a Twinkie or this year, we got his new fried item. It was a meatball mozzarella corn dog. You want to tell the folks what sort of the construction of this thing was?
Yes, take a stick, skewer a meatball, follow that with a large cube of mozzarella cheese, meatball, mozzarella, dip that in a corn dog batter, fry it, plate it on a paper tray with a little ramekin of marinara sauce, and you've got yourself Chicken Charlie's meatball mozzarella corn dog.
And it was awesome. We shared it. I could not imagine a human being putting it down by themselves. I mean, it'd be immediate cardiac arrest. But we really enjoyed sharing it. We kind of go bite for a bite. It was, it was about $17, $18. We split it with two people. It held us for a good 4 or 5 hours, that thing.
Absolutely. The mozzarella was high quality, huge cheese stretches, and the meatball was also very good as well, which meatballs can be extremely hit or miss. This would, I think, also one of my pieces of advice if you are going to a fair and you are planning to eat large quantities. A, light breakfast.
Yes.
Me and Jim both had smoothies.
Right.
And then go with somebody who is willing to split things with you. Because
Right.
many of the things at the fair are really made for two people.
Yes.
And any sane calculation of what appetite should be.
And we were there with my girlfriend, our wonderful producer, Will Slade. And Will Slade also ventured into Chicken Charlie's, and he got bacon-wrapped, deep-fried pickles, which he let us enjoy. Believe it or not, good amount of sodium in those items.
Yeah.
I Googled the nutritional facts.
My hands were puffy the rest of the day
swell
after
up.
one bite.
And Chicken Charlie also, I did not get this item, but folks of the, fans of the podcast know I love my mac and cheese. And Chicken Charlie has this cone, a giant, a cardboard cone.
Wax
of,
paper.
A foot and a half big. And it's filled with buffalo chicken, French fries, and mac and cheese. I did not get it this year, but hey, just a reason to go back next year.
Yeah, unreal combination, and God bless Chicken Charlie for all he does.
But they're frying everything at the fair, butter, cheese. Everyone who's been to a fair has seen the crazy stuff they'll deep fry. But something I love about the LA County Fair is they actually have lots of really good barbecue. I'm sure at the Texas State Fair and some of those places down in the southern part of the United States, the barbecue's better. That's fine. But here in LA, they actually do pretty good barbecue. Like we went to a place that, had a lot of nice looking ribs and skewers. There was a Greek place that was kind of doing gyro meat, and that looked really good. And there's a ton of great kind of taco stand type places. So you have this great mix of different types of food. The one constant, though, that we were seeing at a lot of places is the turkey leg. Now, you, John, you are not a huge fan of the turkey leg. Is that right?
I love it in concept. I mean, who doesn't want to walk around with a giant drumstick of meat?
Right.
However, turkey is notoriously finicky to cook
Yeah.
and easily dries out, and leaving it over open coals for hours on end is not a recipe for succulent turkey.
Now, at the LA County Fair, they have addressed this relative dryness that can occur with turkey legs, and they have made the decision to have your turkey leg, standard turkey leg, slice it open, kind of butterflying it, and then in the cavity do a huge scoop of my favorite mac and cheese. Now, again, a reason to come back next year. I didn't get it this year. I don't know, though. It's just... you brought up the great thing about the turkey leg is you're walking around gnawing on it like a caveman, right?
Yeah.
That is really fun, and you can walk around the fair gnawing on a turkey leg. Even if it's dry, that's still a pretty fun sensory experience. However, you stuff it with mac and cheese, you can't really get it to go. You got to kind of sit down, and I don't even know what you eat it with, because it's hard to do a turkey leg with knife and fork. I guess you're just kind of scooping a bite of mac, picking up the leg, taking a chomp, alternating that. Is that how you're tackling that bad boy?
I think you're probably getting after it with a fork and a knife.
Okay.
I think you're slicing off some pieces of the turkey.
Something we love whenever we go to a fair, and I think is just a good strategy, is alternating sweet and savory. You don't want to just do all your savory foods throughout the day and then hit the sweets at the end of the day. You kind of want to go back and forth. So, you and I, we started with the meatball mozzarella corn dog, and then that lasted us for a few hours. And then we got into the beautiful soft serve ice cream. I love the swirl, the chocolate and vanilla. The chocolate, it's not too assertive. The vanilla is nice and creamy. There's just something about soft serve, isn't there?
You also get, I feel like anytime I've ever gotten soft serve, you just get a ton. Like they really give you a lot. You never feel like you're cheaped out.
There's only one size too. Like it's never like large soft serve. Medium, it's just like soft serve, and it's like and it's like okay, huge 6-7 inch pile of it. So
and
it's always great.
The way it comes out is so beautiful. The swirl, the ripple that goes down the side. It is a truly beautiful dessert.
And then after our soft serve, we went back to savory, and you and our fair producer Will Slade split a huge Polish sausage or Polish hot dog.
Polish dog. It was 1.5 pounds. Half pound. So we each had a 1/4 pound.
Okay.
Again, another reason why it's good to bring a buddy. Last year, you and I, we split 3 feet of pork belly.
It was 2 feet of pork belly. It was a 2-foot pork belly skewer, and that was plenty of meat for a couple of brothers to take down.
Yeah. So that was another
great.
excellent savory option.
And then I went with the pulled pork mac and cheese, a big surprise, Jim mac and cheese. I get it. And then we ended the night, as we ended it last year when we went to the LA County Fair, with a humongous donut from Texas Donuts. Texas Donuts, I believe, is a donut shop out in Whittier, which is kind of outside Los Angeles. And they have a fair stand, and they have soft serve and funnel cake, but they are known for these huge donuts. Each donut, they do big raised donuts, and they do glazed ones, and then you basically just get your toppings. So if you get a chocolate one, they dump the chocolate icing on top. You can get, like our friend Will got, a maple bacon donut, which, again, immediate cardiac arrest if you put down the whole thing. But, we were taking bites here and there, and it was insane. They also told him he was the first person who ever ordered it. They'd had it on the menu since the beginning of time. He was the first person who ever ordered it.
And yeah, these donuts are the size of your face. They
Yes.
are humongous.
Each donut is probably the equivalent of 3 to 4 raised donuts, regular donuts, right?
Yeah, but they are impeccably made.
Yes.
They are really, really good. They're not greasy. They are sending them out so quickly that they don't have time to get old. They're not
Yes,
sitting under the
yes.
heat lamps. They are being freshly fried and given to you. Last year, I got one that was completely plain, and I was like, this is plenty. This is
Right.
very sweet. I am had enough. And then this year I got it covered in condensed milk frosting, some Mexican peanut candy that was Butterfinger-ish, and then drizzled in fudge. And it's really a excellent way to end the day at the fair, because you're just like, well, I really did it. I've had.
Yeah, I finished it off with a chocolate one, and icing got all over my face, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I will say this: we forgot one thing about the sweet tooth you can satisfy at the LA County Fair. They have all these expos, these kind of indoor exhibitions, which we'll get to. But one that was really cool is they have this candy maze where you walk through, and they got every type of candy imaginable, gummies and chocolates and caramels and every type of brand, niche or super popular. They got it. Every type of edition, Milky Way Dark, Milky Way Midnight, Milky Way with peanuts. So that's just a Snicker, right? But look at me, kind of taking it at Milky Way.
Big Milky Way.
But yeah, that was really fun too. And you and I tried for the first time ever these. They were called like Choco Mallows or
Mallow pies,
Mallow
perhaps?
creams. They were basically a Reese's peanut butter cup, but instead of filled with peanut butter, it was filled with marshmallow cream, and those were really delicious. But I think when you're at the fair and you're going through all the food, you know how there's that saying, like when a woman's getting married, you want something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue, right?
That's it.
I think at the fair it's similar, but it's something fried, something grilled and or smoked, something on a stick, something cold, something outrageous, right? It's like these different things, and these can overlap too, right? The meatball mozzarella corn dog is a good example of something fried, something on a stick, and something outrageous,
Yeah.
right? But I do think there are kind of these boxes you need to check when you're at the fair, and we were there from noon to 9 p.m. We were there all day, so it's like, yeah, you really want to, it comes around once a year, dedicate a whole day to it. Don't worry about calories and just have a great time.
It's the ultimate cheat day.
Yes.
And this food is really something that should only be eaten once a year, but you should eat it once a year.
Absolutely. A lot of good drinks at the fair as well, the LA County Fair. You're a beer guy when you enjoy an adult beverage. What'd you think of the beers at the LA County Fair?
Fantastic. I mean, the craft beer movement really took off probably about a decade ago now, and it's just commonplace. Like, you can really get excellent beer pretty much anywhere. And I think that's another thing about the fair that maybe people don't understand, is that you think of it as something for children.
Right.
But it is actually a great place for adults.
Yeah.
Like, it is a really fun place to, imbibe. And
Yeah.
the balance too of the food allows you to have a bit, eat something gigantic that soaks it all up, and then, you're able to sober up and
rinse, repeat.
Rinse, repeat.
But
You're-
yes, it's nice though being there for 9 hours, because as you were about to say, you can sober up a bit, and it's like, okay, yes, I'm going to imbibe in these things that normally I wouldn't want to drive home after, but it's like, I'll stop 3-4 hours early and kind of digest the food, let the liquor get out of my system, and then feel comfortable driving home.
Yeah, and there's a great level of like sensory overload as well, so you might as well have a little buzz going on. So, but anyway, in terms of the beers that they've got lots of these like domestic. They started as sort of craft breweries, but now have become either so big on their own or purchased by other larger breweries. So you've got like Kona and Stone, lots of like local LA breweries as well, which is always cool to see the highlighted regional makers of it. But you can also get your real, classic American available nationwide beers. They had Michelob was the number one, which, a bit of an underrated beer.
I like
People-
Michelob.
Yeah.
I due to my gout, I can't have beer quite as much. So I was I went with the margarita, doctor's orders, and the margarita at the LA County Fair is great. It comes in a shaker, so you can kind of shake it throughout the day, and then it comes with a little shot glass lid on top. So if you don't want the ice and like the lime wedge and stuff, you just pour it in the little shot glass and kind of sip it as you're walking along. And again, it's like the turkey leg. It's a good item to have as you're kind of on the go. And yeah, man, they really, in addition to beers, they have, seltzers and palomas and all that stuff. But one of our favorite things to do, we did this last year at the fair and we did it again this year. The LA County Fair has this great deal on wine tasting. There's like this $20, you get to taste 5 wines, really good quality California wines too, right?
They're all the gold medal winners that have been submitted for the wine competition. You can sample them. And I think people, when you live in California, perhaps you're not really aware of it as much as perhaps you should be. But this is one of the great wine growing and producing regions in all of the world. And not just like extra high level top shelf stuff, but the everyday drinking wines, which is mostly what they're testing at this and judging at this county fair. These are excellent, like really, really high quality wines. And it's, a real treat to be able to have this sort of experience, basically a wine tasting for $20. You are not getting a wine tasting for $20 anywhere else.
Yeah, especially in California where it's gotten so expensive in so many of the wine regions. But it's funny, it's kind of a mix of lowbrow and highbrow because the wine tasting very highbrow, right? And then you have it in the middle of this fair like you're watching, the tilt-a-whirl.
Yeah,
you're sampling
you're watching people scream because they're getting whipped around on the zipper.
Yeah, exactly.
While you're savoring a Cab Sauv by Michael David.
The other great thing about the LA County Fair is the weather here is really great. They used to have the fair, I think, more in September, which LA's summers can kind of extend, and it would be a little warm then. But they've done it the past few years in May, and it really, in contrast to the California State Fair, where you said it's July, August, it's 100-plus degrees most days. You're outside, it's 70, 75 degrees, the sun's going down, it's absolutely beautiful. And there are just some great sights at the fair as well. Like, there's something about seeing the big mighty Ferris wheel against the sunset. Like there is some, it's kind of lowbrow, but there is like a weird beauty to all that.
There's lots of neon and also smoke coming off the various grills, and you're just in this dreamscape. Like it is something that should not exist, and yet we've all come together. Everybody's pitched in, and it is really a wonderful place to be.
All right, well, we told you what we ate and drank. When we come back, we're going to tell you what we saw. All right, let's talk the attractions and expositions we saw at the LA County Fair. I want to start with something very near and dear to my heart, the tiny town we saw. Attentive listeners of this podcast will remember from our I Don't Get episode that I didn't get why people don't get model train miniature towns, these sort of worlds. And, I professed my love for them. And at the LA County Fair, they got one of the best miniature worlds you'll ever see. I learned a new term called hardscaping, in which, they kind of have these garden railroads, landscaping, grass and all that crap. But hardscaping is using hard stuff like rocks and other stuff, and you kind of build almost like cliffs or rock faces that you would see in nature, but in these miniature worlds. And they call it at the LA County Fair the Garden Railroad. But yeah, what was it like? This is a selfish question. What was it like watching me watch the Garden Railroad?
It's a kid in a candy store. You were in Willy Wonka's chocolate factory.
Augustus Gloop
you were
and the
Augustus
Chocolate River.
I'm surprised you didn't try to get in.
Yeah,
to
I
that tiny town.
would have been carried away.
Your eyes there was a twinkle in them. It was boyish with wonder.
They're beautiful. You walk in and it's massive. I mean, it's the size of probably half a football field. and they got the hardscaping. They got all these tunnels. With model trains, tunnels they're a must. I could go for another hour on that, but I digress. And it's just really cool. They have all these little different towns that the trains connect. Like they'll have sort of kind of these small town Americana, like sort of 20s to 40s, almost like Grapes of Wrath little settlements you'll see. And then, they'll have kind of these old West towns. They'll have sort of, a 1950s drive-in or like a junkyard. They'll have kind of like a port town where, trading would go on. And just, it was incredible, all these worlds. And they would have all different kinds of trains. And, even on the train tracks, you'd see like the Batmobile and stuff like that. There were just so many fun touches, and it was so artistic, yet also pragmatic. It's like, okay, you got to suspend the disbelief, the Batmobile going in reverse on a train track, next to an Amtrak. But it's like, this is just awesome. That's the great thing. You get to play God in these miniature worlds.
Yeah, there is a real artistry to it, but at the same time, I don't think any of the people who were volunteering there would necessarily think of themselves as artists. Maybe they would, more like hobbyists.
Yes,
I think
yes.
they all seemed really, really happy
Yeah.
and satisfied watching the trains run around. I mean, there's a good amount of engineering. There's a good amount of attention to detail and sort of historical accuracy that goes into it. It's
Yeah.
a very all-encompassing sort of activity.
Historical accuracy, although you will have dinosaurs on top of trains. But that's why you get to play God in these miniature worlds. Speaking of playing God, we walked by, it's pretty fun at one point, you walk by the control room where all the hobbyists engineers are, and that reminded me of like God's throne in heaven where they're controlling all the panels, or it's like in the Truman Show, Ed Harris's character, like you're controlling everything about it. That was really tempting me. I picked up the brochure, you can volunteer with these folks, and I don't know, my cowardice may get the best of me, but I will say in that moment I was quite tempted to join the Garden Railroad.
Seems like a great time. The trains are running on the tracks beautifully, humming along. People are oohing and on.
And after we left the tiny town and we were going through the fair, clearly the experience had soaked pretty deep into your bones, because you made an observation about the fair at large and its relation to tiny towns. Care to share?
The fair is essentially a tiny town.
Kaboom! Mind exploding. Discuss. What do you mean the fair is essentially a tiny town?
Well, the tiny town doesn't really make any sense. There shouldn't be dinosaurs next to a 50s town next to an Old West town. It's ludicrous.
Right.
And yet, at the same time, it all makes sense. It all fits harmoniously together. And what we saw walking around the many attractions of the fair, which is also an underrated feature of the fair, that there are the county's best work in all of these different fields that you wouldn't think of. And so as we walked away from the tiny town, we walked through a long aisle of tricked out lowriders in all sorts of different configurations, these candy paint jobs, really cool, like auto clubs. Again, people hanging out, looking delighted. We walk into an event center. There's this exhibition of home decorating.
Yeah.
We move further on. There's the petting farm and the animals and all of these different things. And there's all of this different stuff that you get to experience where you would never. There is a museum with art, a Warhol.
But it's all these disparate worlds, these disparate towns that are somehow harmoniously contained under the umbrella of the LA County Fair.
Yeah, it all makes sense. And I think it's really for people that if you have a really specialized interest in something, go for it. Or if you're a person who's like, once a year, I'll look at some lowriders and quilts.
Yeah, the lowriders were cool. We've been here in LA to the Automotive Museum, and they similarly had a lowrider exhibit, and the level of artistry is stunning. It's as enjoyable and as detail oriented as any great painter, any great ceramicist, like any of those great exhibitions you'll see in museums. And they had it at the fair, and it was really, really cool. I mean, they had motorcycles and cars, and there's a real level of artistry that goes into the decals. And one touch I love about the lowriders when they exhibit them is they'll stick mirrors under the cars so you can see underneath, like the fine metalworking, the fine engravings, the fine artistry, and it really gives you an appreciation for it. And I think it's very unique to Los Angeles and car culture, and combining the two, Los Angeles car culture.
Yeah, because you need a car pretty much to exist in Los Angeles. Right. It is a city built for the automobile, which I think when you say that, most people the first thought is traffic. And I hate driving in Los Angeles because there's so much traffic. But if you've ever been down here and you've been driving around in the middle of a weekday afternoon and the roads are clear, it's one of the great cities to drive in. And you see these guys riding around in lowriders every now and again, and you're just, every time I see them, it's like the opposite of when a really loud motorcycle rips by and you're like, all right, geez. But when you see the guy in the lowrider, like, awesome. Like, you want to make eye contact with that guy and nod to him like, you're doing it, man. You're doing a great job.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, when we would go inside, you mentioned the huge exhibit of the home decorations. You know, there was beautiful quilts. There was incredible lace work. There was something I had never, maybe I'd heard of, I hadn't really seen. There were table setting competitions. So there would be like a theme, and then you would just set the most perfect, beautiful table with the silverware and the glasses. And you would create a menu, which I thought was kind of funny. There was kind of like an oceanside theme, and the menu had like caviar and abalone and things that would cost, you know, hundreds, thousands of dollars. But it's like, this is, hey, you get to invent this. And like, I guess you would say these people are hobbyists, but in this exposition, there was a level more so perhaps of artistry with some of this stuff.
For that oceanside one that you're talking about, it was the first place winner, and they had this backdrop that had mermaids like suspended in water. And it's like, wow, how did you pull that off? And there were also like New Orleans themed things and all sorts of different like fanciful English sort of a style. And it's just stuff where it's just like, who knew that people are decorating and taking decorating to this level? And it wasn't just table settings. There was one for doors.
Yeah.
There was a hallway of doors, like front doors decorated in whimsical fashion.
Christmas tree decorating. That was very cool. One thing that really stood out to me was there was a man who he referred to the art. I tried Googling it and couldn't really find an example of it, but he was referring to the art as shoshu, and it was this Japanese silk thread art where he would use threads of colored silk to basically create paintings. If you were about 20 feet away, they would just look like a painting or a photograph, but the closer you got, you saw the very intricate silk work.
And it shines.
It was incredible.
Yeah.
It was incredible. There were these kind of like misty mountains, sort of like Japanese landscapes you've seen. He kind of had one piece with like cherry blossoms and like, I think, koi fish, and it was just stunning. And it's like, that is what's so great too about county fairs, is just these people you would never meet, you would never come into contact with in daily life, once a year are brought in, are recognized for their hard work, for their artistry. And it's just really cool to witness and to celebrate.
And it's something, too, that I do not possess much interest in, but I will look at it for 5 minutes once a year.
Absolutely.
And I think it's great that is available, you know?
And speaking of things we don't see too often, we saw a lot of livestock at the fair. That is a hallmark of going to a fair. It's really great. You walk into the barn and you're immediately met with the smell of goat and pig crap and the hay and the straw on the ground. And it's, you know, for guys like us who, you know, our parents owned a farm for a few years, and we've done some rural living and some farm labor here and there. You know, it's a familiar smell to us. It's like kind of hilarious every time. It's like, it smells like crap, you know?
I'll say this. For me, there's something vaguely comforting about it. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. These animal exhibitions, these barns are really, really clean.
Yes,
like it's dirt, but it's like the cleanest dirt floor you've ever seen. There's no trash. There's no like straw all over the place. Any, you know, fecal matter is taken care of and
it's not like
away.
And it's not like a poorly run zoo either, where it's like these animals are neglected, not getting the right nutrients. Like, the farmers are all there who own them and take care of them and really have this relationship you would have with a pet. Like, so if you're someone who has a dog you live with or a service animal, it's like these people totally relate. It's just, it happens to be a goat instead of a Yorkshire Terrier.
Yeah, we saw a goat milking, not competition, but demonstration last year, and the woman who was milking the goat referred to the goat as a diva. Like, it wanted the attention. Like, it was really preening for the crowd.
That's really seeing the humanity in the goat. But we saw cows with their calves, and then there was this huge mother pig with little piglets napping next to it, and the mother pig had on her body what can only be described as milk-gorged teats. That was a phrase I sort of kept repeating because I couldn't really think of another way to express it. She had these huge teats, and they were gorged with milk that the piglets would suckle upon.
Yeah, I can't tell our listeners how many times that I've heard my brother say those exact words.
MGTs.
Against my will. It's something that Jim does. He will latch on to little phrases every now and again. But yeah, you could just sit by, and I did for probably about 3 minutes, just watching the little piglets, and they would be napping, and then one would realize that he was sort of on the outside of the pig pile, and he's like getting a little cold, so he would climb on top of his other little fellas, and their little tails all wagging, snouts bashing into each other, and then they're like upset at this one for climbing on top of him, and then he gets a little peeved, so he, waddles away and nestles into some hay, and then he falls asleep again. So, and the whole time the mother pig out cold. The other thing that I find striking is cows have just beautiful eyes. Like their eyelashes are very long and beautiful.
Yeah, wow.
And another thing too, we were just looking at these sheep, and there was this lady asking a question to the farmer, and it seemed like a woman who obviously didn't get out in the rural community much. It's like, what horns does that animal have? Is that a ram? And she's like, no, that's a lamb, not a ram, a lamb. And she's like, lamb have horns? And the lady's like, yeah. And I was like, I don't know that I knew that lambs had horns. So you're just like learning all of this stuff again that you would never think to learn. But yeah, I would say the main attraction is the petting farm, they call it.
Before we get to that, I still got milk-gorged teats on the mind. We drink cow's milk. We drink goat's milk. Why don't we drink pig's milk? Are they too low to the ground to milk? What is it? Why don't we drink pig's milk?
They're in mud all the time, and I don't know how you would get a bucket underneath a pig. It would have to be a tray. And again, if it's a low-sided tray, you're in the mud. And if you have the pig on its side, I'm not sure how you're getting it out. I think, too, it's just not worth the hassle.
Maybe the milk tastes like carnitas.
Or tonkatsu ramen.
Who knows? Let's get to the petting broth, if you will. Let's get to the petting farm. That's really fun. It's a bunch of goats, bunch of sheep. You pay $3, you get a little cup of food, and you got to be careful because these goats and sheep, they're not small. They're pretty big. Their backsides are about 3 to 4 feet tall, and they tell you, they instruct you, the farmers, to hold the food above your head. Because the goats and sheep will just knock it out of your hand and just start, biting and stuff.
They'll knock you over.
And they'll knock you over. So if you hold it up high, they'll sometimes leap up on you like a big dog, and the hooves will get up on your shoulders, and it can be scary. They're a little aggressive, the goats and sheep.
Very much so. It reminds me of when I've been in, vacation communities or touristy areas, and you have to maintain this sort of good pace and avoidance of eye contact unless you want to be waylaid by souvenir hawkers.
Right.
That is what the goats remind me of. And also there is a evil to goats. Whereas I saw loveliness in the eyes of cows, I saw pure desire in the eyes of the goats and a willingness to discard of me for the small cup of pellets that I kept in my hands.
We also watched a goat show, and we were trying to kind of decipher the judging criteria for it. What did you sort of determine was what the judges were looking for in these kind of goat competitions?
They're looking for goatliness, I think. No, like
just silhouette.
A lot of the same stuff that you're looking for in a dog show. It's like, is this the perfect example of this animal? But as opposed to a dog show, to me, the deciding factor seemed to be fattest goat wins.
Yeah,
and they were in order of fatness.
And he kept mentioning not to get back onto milk gorged teats, but he kept getting onto the mammary system, which at first I kept thinking he was saying memory system. And I was like, how does he know how good a memory these goats have that remember him and he judged them last year? But mammary, of course, the reproductive, the nurturing element of the
It's where the milk comes out of.
Exactly. Yes.
And I think the other thing too is these are goats. They're not walking themselves. They're not parading themselves. They're all being showcased by young kids who have come from 4-H clubs all around. And there is just this earnest pureness to the people who are showing off their goats, the pride that they feel in them. You can tell that they have nurtured these animals from when they were kids,
Yeah.
the term for goats.
Oh, funny.
And they are over the moon when their efforts are recognized and they get a medal.
Did you feel guilty that as you were at this petting zoo with these animals that you could smell smoked meat and barbecue mere a football field away? You could smell these smells. Do you think the animals are bothered by it?
That I do feel guilty about, that animals are potentially smelling the cooking flesh of their compadres when all of them are vegetarians. However, I think a necessary thing to realize about these animals is, yes, us city folk are seeing them for the first time live and well, but most of the time when we're seeing them, they're packaged up in the supermarket, and that's what they're there for. That is why we grow the pig's fat, the goat's fat, we get the cow's fat, and they're there to produce food, and that is their role. So that is, what they're being celebrated for, and their inherent loveliness in and of themselves is secondary to their utility.
Still, it reminds me of a time many moons ago when I was in Monterey and went to the beautiful, famous Monterey Bay Aquarium and saw all the majesty of the fish and sea life. And then as soon as I was done that afternoon, I walked about a block down Cannery Row, went into a restaurant, and then promptly ordered oysters Rockefeller and fried calamari. There is something, and you're eating this, and you're seeing these fish housed a mere stone's throw from the mighty Pacific Ocean. There is, they're I don't know. I was able to suppress it as we were at the fair, but it is curious. It behooved mentioning.
It makes you think, and perhaps we should all be thoughtful consumers in that way.
That's a good point. Well, in terms of other uses for pigs, the L.A. County Fair's got them. They had pig races. There is at the L.A. County Fair. This kind of old cowboy showman. I didn't get his name. We saw him last year, and he did these pig, duck, and goat races. There were a few animals he did.
This year, he swapped the ducks for baby lambs.
Baby lambs. And he's a really fun guy. He does kind of, shticky. He's got an act, right? We saw it last year and we saw it this year, and with all the beats were the same. It was like those old Catskills comics who would do the same act for 30 years or whatever.
But he is legit.
He's awesome.
He's got dirty boots. He's got jeans that have been worn to heck. It seems, does these races, but I think also does raise livestock. This was not a actor. This was not an LA person. This was somebody who lives out in the country.
We also saw they had the Budweiser Clydesdales. That was very fun to see as well. Those are huge, huge horses. Their backsides are about as tall as me, about 6 feet tall, some taller, and boy, are those mighty beasts.
They weigh a ton.
Literal ton.
It is, astonishing to see an animal so large.
It was also really cool as we were going through the fairgrounds. There's a lot of different venues where they have live music playing, and just really cool the variety of genres from kind of country western to heavier rock to some people would do kind of singer-songwriter stuff. I saw on the marquee they had hip-hop groups and R&B groups as well, and that's just a great part of getting out there in the summer when the weather's nice, springtime, and you just seeing live music. It just makes you feel alive, don't it?
Yeah, and you don't have to stick around very long. You can hear 2 songs by a bluegrass group. You can hear a hook by a punk band as you're walking past it. It just suffuses, and there's music playing everywhere, all types of stuff too. So again, just a really complete experience.
And living in Los Angeles, you're always tempted to see the big acts that come through town and paying the exorbitant fees to see those big acts. It's just kind of nice to see local live music. I haven't really heard of these guys. They've put out one album, and they're sort of kin to us as musicians that haven't quite hit the big time, but outside of having a theme song on a well-known podcast. It reminds me of the days when we lived in Sacramento and we'd see great local acts, and there's something very special
They're
about it.
psyched to be there. It's a big deal for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Then, of course, there are the carnival games. We did not really go on any rides. Everyone knows the typical fair rides, Ferris wheel, the zipper, the tilt-a-whirl, all that stuff.
The slingshot that shoots you 150 feet in the air.
My girlfriend likes rides. You somewhat like rides. Is that right, John?
Yeah.
You kind of like them. Will and I, Will sort of more so than me. I do not like heights. I don't like rides too much. I go to Disneyland, Pirates of the Caribbean. I could do a few of those, the easy, gentle boat rides.
Teacups.
I could do a log ride once in a while. That's about as crazy as I'll go. But we didn't really go on any of the rides, but we did do the fair games. And I hadn't really done fair games in a while, these kind of carnival games. When you're a kid, you still are so naive. You believe in chance and you haven't been you haven't lost your innocence in terms of games of chance and gambling. But it really struck me this time that, boy, all of these games are rigged.
Nigh impossible to get your money's worth. There was one that was like hit 8 shots on a basketball hoop in 15 seconds. But the thing about the hoop is the rim, if you look at it closely, is tilted upwards. It's not regulation size.
Right.
There were other guys trying to throw their arms out to throw a baseball into a mitt. There was a soccer goal where you had to slot it in a ball-sized square. Like
top left corner.
These are just avenues for humiliation, and there was so many. The recurring theme, which luckily my brother, who was successful at one of these games,
thank you. I threw a bean bag at a balloon,
popped it,
and
he got a tiny little donut that said "kiss me" on it for his efforts. But what you see over and over and over again is men attempting to impress women with this and then succumbing to the impossible odds of the game. And then you either have to pony up a stupid amount of money that is way over the value of whatever the stuffed animal is, or you walk away utterly dejected, your manhood hanging on by just a thread.
And best case scenario, you win a giant Hello Kitty, squishmallow, and
you have to carry it around the rest of the day.
You got to carry it around the rest of the fair, because even if you win it for a gal, she'll probably make you carry it, But anyway, I don't have to get too deep into that. But anyway,
that's not this. This isn't that type of podcast.
But I think part of in terms of just the finances of it, they will have a thing where it's like, okay, you have to hit the balloon 3 times with a ball, and each ball costs $5 worth of tickets. So it's like, okay, I'm spending $15 on the Hello Kitty Squishmallow. That's if I do it perfectly. More likely, you're going to spend like $30, $40 with all these attempts. So at a certain point, you're just like, okay, I'm paying $40 for a stuffy I don't even want, right? It's just when you think of the economics of it, yes, it's very fun, but it's just like, it just is like, I don't know. You get older, and they're still kind of fun to play, but it's like you kind of step back and look at it from a bird's eye view, and it's a little depressing.
There is a great feature, too, of the carnies, who are very eager to entice you to their game.
Right.
Very easy, sir. Very easy. Right this way. They'll even try to demonstrate it for you to show how easy that it is. And once you've handed over your tickets and you've failed and they've determined no more tickets are to be got from you, all of the smiles and right this way go. They don't even know you. They've never even seen you before.
They're playing 3-card Monty in an alleyway. That's who these people are. There's a couple of the other games that were just making me laugh. There's the ring toss onto the necks of glass Coke bottles from 10 feet away.
You might as well just be throwing dollar bills at them.
in the trash, and get a little ping pong ball and a floating plastic ducky that it's immediately going to bounce off of. Just no chance it's going to give and accept the ball. So it is just very, very funny. It is fun, but I don't know. You see, at a certain age, and those carnival games lose their luster a bit.
Yeah, we only did them because we had free tickets. The
That is
Flynn
true.
Brothers podcast would never condone spending money on a fair game.
Never. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we got John's brief history of fairs. All right, time for John's brief history of fairs. Take it away, brother.
Okay, so obviously the marketplace is a feature of human life since BC, from the Greeks to the Chinese to the Mesoamerican cultures. People would come together for religious feasts and holidays as well. So a fair is kind of like a combination of both of those, the marketplace and sort of a religious feast. It's a celebration of all things that people have come together. And there's always been a sort of heavy emphasis on trade and commerce. We get the probably most excellent example of the fairs. The time of the fairs has obviously passed, sadly. The World's Fair, these international exhibitions that were put on to showcase the great inventions of the late 19th and early 20th century. We can thank these international exhibitions, these world fairs, for the Eiffel Tower, the telephone, the Ferris wheel, the ice cream cone, zippers, ketchup, all things that were first introduced at World's Fair.
I think you forgot to mention the meatball mozzarella corn dog. Wasn't that? That was
You're right.
in Chicago, right?
That's an oversight. The Pabst Blue Ribbon, where that blue ribbon comes from, is it was named America's Best at the 1933 Chicago Fair. That was also where Wrigley's decided that they were done making baking soda and they were ready to become a full-time chewing gum
How
corporation.
about that? Wow.
The county fair, like the one that we attended and we are most focused on here, originated in 1841 by a name you don't really hear too often anymore, Elkanah Watson,
Wow.
a New England patriot and farmer. He created a cattle show in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. $70 was given for the winner of best cattle, oxen, sheep, and swine.
Now, you said he was a New England Patriot. I assume not the football player.
No, I don't think he suited up at left tackle. I also, one thing I noticed, why can't we say pigs? Why do we got to say swine?
Yeah, that is funny. It's kind of the gussied up name for pigs.
But
Yeah,
it's
I
also,
don't
to
know.
me, feels very insulting.
Yeah, it's even worse in a way. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I don't know. Hey, we should do a brief history of the term swine at some point.
I'll put it down in the notebook. We've got, obviously, this is just we're a way for agriculture and commerce to come together, people to see the great things. There is an international association of fairs and expos who mentions how there are many educational aspects of attending a fair, as we noted, with the quilts and the lowriders and all the other various, the live music. And they put it perfectly, I think. They say, while enjoying these high-minded pursuits, fair visitors can also see, hear, touch, smell, and taste the richness and variety of what the world has to offer.
I like that it hits all the sensory notes because that's really, it is just an incredibly stimulating sensory experience, the fair.
It is an absolute feast.
For the eyes, ears,
for all of
nose,
it.
gut.
Like, to hear, you're hearing all sorts of music, the carnival, the rides, rubbing around. Yeah, touch, you can touch the lips of a goat and also a corn dog.
The lips of a goat.
Well, when they're eating out of your
yeah.
hands. You know, I
I was
don't mean
thinking
with
you
your
pet them.
fingertips.
You weren't like getting in there looking at their teeth like
Although
a dentist.
that is a good point. When you're in the petting zoo, you're like, I see why wool has
Oh
such
yeah,
a
sure. Oh
grip
yeah,
on the marketplace.
absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah, but that is, I think it is this sort of bygone thing, the fair, that people perhaps see as something that they don't need to go to, that there's nothing really for them there, but boy, there really is a whole lot.
That's a hell of a brief history. I really enjoyed it. I think I'll tell you this. Our first episode was about the racetrack and wanting to bring back the racetrack, this other example of bygone Americana. And I think the county fair is similar. Like, look, you don't necessarily want to go there every single weekend, but once a year, you got to make the trip. Like, there are things that need to be preserved, that need to be enjoyed, that need to be carried on. And I think the county fair is just one of those things. And, the theme at the LA County Fair this past year was Arts Unleashed, which I don't typically find arts to be too leashed, but anyway, they were unleashed at the fair. And it was just so cool. I didn't even really consider the educational component because it is so fun, because it is so interesting. But I learned what shoe art is, and I learned more about table setting competitions. And there are some educational aspects of it that are pretty invigorating.
But I think the main thing that is great about the fair is, as they said, with all of the senses, it is overwhelming.
Yes.
When you first walk into the fairgrounds, you almost get dizzy. Like
Yes,
there's just
yes.
so many things happening. There's so many different choices of things you can do and eat and drink and see, and you just sort of let it all wash over you. And the more that you're there, the more that you become comfortable with it. You're like, okay, I know where I am. I've been past this thing. I know if I want to get that later, so I'm going to come back this way. And you just really develop a feel for it. And the other thing that's great, and usually I don't, love being in a huge crowd. The fair is one time where I really just love being in a sea of people.
Yeah, I think the LA County Fair in particular, it's so unpretentious. And like the racetrack, there are all kinds of folks. There are families, there are people of every age, race, income level. There are older people, younger people, like going on dates. And it's just such a celebration of life and society. And, particularly in Los Angeles, it is such a contrast to the typical stereotypes people have and are kind of true sometimes in the neighborhood we live in, where there's like a pretentiousness and there's sort of this arrogance and sort of this turning up your nose at things that are as mainstream as a county fair, with air quotes, right? It is just so refreshing to live in Los Angeles and get to escape out to Pomona and go to the LA County Fair and have a meatball mozzarella corn dog. It really is so special.
It's good old-fashioned fun. And I think the other thing, too, is you get to look into your past and future. You get to see the childlike joy of trying cotton candy for the first time or going on your first date. There's so many people who are like teenagers in high school going on their first date, or they're part of a little pack and they're finally their parents, they drop them off and they're getting to sort of do their own thing. They get to make the choices now. And then there's, people our age, you can hang out, but then you see older couples. You see couples that are raising kids and you're like, man, what must it be like to have a kid at this event? And you see even older couples, much older couples holding each other sort of arm in arm. And it's just this wide sea of humanity.
With the stereotype, too, I mentioned with people in Los Angeles, there's a lot of attention paid to the outfit you wear out and a lot of self-involvement and obsession with self-image. Whereas at the fair, you can look like a slob. There's just like kind of a shamelessness.
Yeah, you're good.
I'm good.
Yeah.
Good.
You want to add another syllable or something?
And it's just great. It's just come as you are. We're all laughing at the food we're eating. No one's like, this is the greatest food in the world. It's like, it's fun. It's hilarious. Don't tell my doctor, right? Like it's just a great time. And it's like, if you're too cynical or ironic to not enjoy the county fair, it's just like, hey, it doesn't need you,
You're missing out. You're probably going to step and poop. You're probably going to get mustard on your shirt. You're going to eat too much. You're going to sweat, but you are going to be alive. And there's this David Foster Wallace wrote this huge essay about going to the Illinois State Fair, and he mentioned that at the end, what people like about the fair is not getting away from crowds, which he's lived in New York, and I can see if you lived in New York where it's very claustrophobic, there's people always around you, you wouldn't think of going to the fair as an escape. However, what he says is that people who live in these rural areas, you live out so far away from other human contact. Other houses are acres and acres and acres away from you. You don't see people very often. You see your wife, you see your kids, you see your cows, and that's who you see. But I actually think that something to that effect applies to Los Angeles because it is so spread out. It is so isolated. When you're in the car on the freeway and you look around, most people are alone in their cars. So many people live in apartments. It's so difficult to build a natural community because so many people commute very far away or don't like going out necessarily. It's not a town where people are shutting down bars at 4 a.m. It's not really the way that it is. And you come to the fair and you're just surrounded by people. And I think you're part of a spectacle. And to your point about people often, I think in Los Angeles, make themselves a spectacle with your outfit, with the way that you're carrying yourself, with how impressive the people you know and the things that you're doing are. And the thing about the fair that's great is that there is no way that you will outshine the fair.
Yeah, that's true. The fair is the star of the fair. And, We talked about on our internet episode everyone's addiction to their phones and devices. Nobody's on their phone or device at the fair. There is so much stimulus. The fair is the star. You want to be looking at the star, right?
It's the one place that remains in American culture where there is enough sensory stimulation that we are not driven to the boxes in our pockets.
And, you know, for all the fried foods you eat, if you're there 9 hours, you do about 20,000 steps. And at the end of the day, it all kind of evens out, doesn't it?
You feel as though you have consumed as much as you can. You have seen the best animals the county has to offer, the best art, the best handiworks, the best decorations. You have eaten your week's worth in fried food. You have done it all. You have really had a full day.
You know, I kept jokingly saying it while I was at the fair. I kept gesturing at the spectacle, and I kept saying to the folks we were with, yourself included, I kept saying...
And Will.
Right.
and your girlfriend. We weren't a
Right.
big party.
Right. Well...
Don't mean to step on your clothes
You
here.
kind of,
Go
yeah,
ahead.
I let you monologue, and here I am trying to put a bow on it, and you can't give me 10 words. I jokingly kept saying, milk gorge teats. There, I got another one in there. No, but the thing I kept jokingly saying is the title of this podcast. I gestured to the spectacle, and I said, boy, the LA County Fair really is heaven on earth. And we were just kind of laughing the whole time, eating our bacon-wrapped pickles and eating our soft serve and thinking it was a big old joke. But, you know, kind of looking back, unironically, I think it's kind of true.
I love it. And unlike the racetrack, no notes.
You going back next year?
Oh, yeah. Can I buy my ticket now?
I'll check. I'm not sure. We bought them through Costco. They were slightly discounted. But look, here we are getting into the nitty gritty at the end of the podcast. We're going to wrap things up. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we got a tasty game. Stick around. All right, it's time for one of our patented Flynn Brothers games. Here's what we're going to do. We are going to invent a multi-course meal at a high-class restaurant inspired by the low-class food you find at a fair. So this is sort of like, as we mentioned earlier, the table setting competition where you can kind of just make up the menu, you know, price and, pragmatic things like that don't have to be considered. And, you know, the goal for this is to kind of expertly balance the low-brow fair food with kind of high-end sort of Michelin-style approach to the cuisine. And we're going to see if we're successful. I got a sneaky feeling we will be, though.
I think so. Welcome to Le Fair.
That's good. That's the name of the restaurant.
Yeah,
Wonderful. We're both competing to be head chef, and we've brought our printed out menus. We have our tables set. They're lovely. And boy, I'm drooling looking over my menu. I go first or you go first?
I'll allow you, buddy.
Thanks. All right, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do 4 items. It'll be a cocktail, an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert. But we're going to start with the cocktail. For the cocktail, I'm going with a cherry icy old-fashioned. So this would sort of be daiquiri meets old-fashioned. Sometimes with like a daiquiri, you'll kind of get where it's like in the center frozen, and on the outside, it's kind of more liquidy. So think of like your typical old-fashions. Like you pour a cherry slushy into a nice glass, and then you kind of do an old fashioned on top of that. So instead of ice, you have the cherry that's kind of infusing the old fashioned, and you know that very distinct icy flavor. You got a nice garnish with the orange rind, the orange slice, of course. That's deep fried. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm thinking cherry icy old fashioned. Get you a little boozy, but also kind of get that sweet tooth going. Get you ready for the savory food to come.
I like that. I had considered doing something cherry related, but I went a different direction. What inspired me was the large amount of smoke that is part of the fair. And so I have a mezcal margarita, which is served. They do these things sometimes where they put like a little lid on top of the drink and then they smoke it. So they're unveiling it, and the smoke is billowing out much as it does from the many grills for meat at the fair.
Wonderful. I'm I'm yearning for something a little more lowbrow in there, but it's a very
Smoke.
good. It's just smoke it's pretty highbrow. That's kind
That's
of a
as
classy
lowbrow
thing.
as it gets.
Smoke.
It's the very first thing we cooked with.
We'll let the viewers decide. Please send an email if you think smoke is high or lowbrow. All right, moving on to appetizer. One of my favorite appetizers is a nice cheese puff like you'd get at a nice French restaurant, kind of made with the choux pastry. So I'm going with, for my appetizer, a flamin' hot Cheeto cheese puff. So this would be a beautiful light choux pastry, classic French style cheese puff, and you would kind of either do a crumble on top or roll the entire thing in that flamin' hot Cheetos dust. I was seeing that a lot at the fair. They're rolling elote, they're rolling all sorts of things in that flamin' hot Cheetos dust. And of course, you got to have cheese in a cheese puff. It's usually incorporated in the choux pastry, but I think when you bite into it, a nice little explosion of nacho cheese might be kind of nice. So we're going to have that as the appetizer. I think that'll dance quite nicely with the cherry icy old fashioned.
Interesting. Yeah, my stomach is grumbling. I would say mine is a little different. Again, inspired by the grills of the fair. I have a izakaya, sort of the Japanese style of grilling, and we're doing a grilled pork sampler.
Okay.
And so we're going to get some rib meat, some grass-fed hot dog, the high
Okay.
and low,
Oh, good,
and then
good.
some pork belly, which is
nice,
bacon. So
nice.
you've got those three. They've got some nice sauces on top of them.
I like that. Different sauces, all the same.
Different sauces.
Okay.
I think maybe you would have a barbecue sauce, a fancy ketchup, and a fancy mustard, and you can dip all three.
Oh,
in
I
them,
like
and
that.
So you
I
get
like
a nice
that.
little
That's very
array.
nice. I like that. I like that a lot. I was considering sampler as well. I thought on appetizer and dessert it was a good approach. So I'm glad one of us went for that. I like that. Okay, time for the entree. I got kind of a play on steak au poivre, steak frites, kind of beef Wellington. It's sort of in this zone. Well,
Let's see.
I think so. Here's what it is. Essentially, the entree, the meat, is a beef Wellington corn dog.
Unbelievable.
Is that what you
That is
put?
exactly what I have.
I think we'll
thought-
have different approaches.
Okay.
then. But what I'm doing is I'm sticking a beautiful filet mignon onto a skewer. I'm dipping it in corn dog batter and frying it. I am serving it alongside one of those nice tornado spiralized potatoes. Is this exactly what you put? Jesus, that is crazy. Did you have that? It has peppercorn au poivre sauce on the bottom.
I did not do peppercorn.
Okay,
because
those are dry. Those are two dry
Yeah.
items. No
Yeah.
vegetable, of course. If you're gonna twist my arm, I'll deep fry some asparagus. But it's kind of it would be. I can kind of see it. It would be nice on a stick, and you could do the tornado potato on a stick. Or really, what I want is you do the tornado potato almost encircling the corn dog beef Wellington. To be frank, I was a little hesitant doing this one. We do have Brother Brain, working as writers and successful podcasters all this time, but it was something where it's like, well, obviously the entree has to be deep fried, and it's like obviously a corn dog's what you think of with a fare. So that's the risk you play when you're in this game.
Yeah, if I were to add on to this, I would sous vide the beef Wellington to make sure that it's cooked
The
right.
filet, the filet, okay.
Yes, and then wrap it in all of the stuff that it needs to be wrapped in. Then you get that nice and cold before you dip it in the batter,
Right.
much in the same way they do to like butter and Snickers bars.
Oh,
that
yes,
stuff
yes,
that they
yes.
deep fry as well. I had slightly different. I had the curly cut steak fries, so sort of
Okay.
similar to your tornado. But I mean, I guess how else are you gonna do like potatoes for a side? Although I thought this was a good one. There was a lot of corn that was being charred, and I thought some charred corn crema, sort of an elote as a
Nice.
side.
That's
a
your
creamed corn.
that's kind of your reprieve from the dry breadedness.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
very
yeah.
nice. Very nice. I like that. All right.
So
let's-
that one's kind of a wash.
That one's kind of a wash. Yeah. All right, let's satisfy our sweet tooth with dessert. For dessert, I am doing deep fried Oreo bread pudding.
Oh, whoa.
So you, I guess, would have the deep fried Oreos because bread pudding. It's usually rips of a baguette or brioche or something. So you got that in the pan. You do your typical custard mixture. You bake that. You do it in like kind of a ramekin. You smack it out onto the plate, and then you kind of do the funnel cake topping approach to it. So you hit it with a little caramel, a little chocolate drizzle. If you want a little creme anglaise on the bottom, Michelin star. And then on top, strawberries, whipped cream, and creme anglaise. That's clashing. Nix the creme anglaise. We'll do strawberries and whipped cream on top like the funnel cake. But yeah, deep fried Oreo bread pudding. You know, those deep fried Oreos, we had them last year, and they're good, but they're very dry. So you need kind of the custard to sort of wake everything back up and give it new life, you know?
Great. I like that a lot. I think mine, I went a slightly different way. Part of what makes something highbrow is plating. And one of the sloppiest things is the funnel cake, obviously, because you're just squirting it in a bunch of oil. So I would have a mold of some sort that would give you a perfect spiral funnel cake. That's my base. We're doing 1 scoop of chocolate, 1 scoop of vanilla, hearkening to the soft serve that is there. But soft serve, I think, is a little too lowbrow for a high-class restaurant.
This is like a gelato or fine ice cream.
Exactly.
Okay.
We're topping it. We're going, all the things. Hot fudge, whipped cream, peanut brittle, bashed up. And then this, I think, is the piece de resistance. There's, the frozen banana that is at the fair.
Yes.
I wouldn't do a frozen banana. I would do a sort of more like the banana that you get at Musso and Frank in the 1919 Sunday.
The bruleed banana.
Banana. However, I want that also coated in chocolate. So that would be on there. And this is a fair, this is a dessert. We have to go even more over the top. So I am putting on top of that, it's not a cherry, I'm putting a deep fried Snickers bar.
There you go, just stuck on top. Yeah. Will likes that one. He was nodding along to your. I think you're going to get hired as the chef at this made-up restaurant. Le Fair. Maybe you'll hire me on as a prep cook. Maybe I could be on the line with you or something.
Bar back.
Cutting up lime wedges before we open. Oh, it's very, very gracious of you, buddy. Well, cool. We got to go get something to eat. So please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer and fellow fairgoer, Will Slade. And we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers Podcast. Take care, buddy.
Hey, buddy, you take care.